Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 403, Hindu Magic. This is another Hereward Carrington work. It's shorter than the other one. It's 38 pages long, so this is a fairly brief tract. Although keep in mind it's longer in its original format. This happens all the time with literature from this particular era. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. I'll also pin it at the top of comments if you're watching this video on YouTube. Second and third links to my books, blogs. It is rare that I do a work like this, because it does cover the occult and a few related things. I'll get into that. Mainly, though, it's an expose on trickery, on illusionism that was used by the Hindu fakirs and yogis at that time. Sometimes I like to edit works that are about that side of spiritual or magical systems as sort of a cautionary tale. A lot of times people get into the occult, I had this problem early on too, and they're sort of taken in by things like fantastic claims. And so you go from attempting to study like mysticism and philosophical traditions, and you end up getting sidelined into, talking about all sorts of weird magic tricks from the Petit Albert or something. Some of them are more legitimate than others, especially within those bric-a-brac works. It can be, especially from roughly the 1720s through the 1850s, it can be a handful trying to parse through it. There's more than a century period there. Talks about, for instance, rope charming, using, various methods to make a rope coil up out of its basket by playing music. The disappearing attendant trick, where you have a boy curl up into a basket, and the idea is the basket's double-lined, and so they can slip below the basket, and then you distract the crowd, and they're able to get out, and then a Confederate comes in and climbs up a tree and says, "Hey, here I am, I escaped the basket," and stuff like that. There's the dry sand trick, which is actually really interesting because it almost verges in on the alchemical. The idea is that you would take regular clean sand, the finest beach sand basically that you could find, and you would briefly fry it. You would coat it in oil. Then you would disperse it, let it cool. It then becomes hydrophobic, and so what you can do is you can swallow, as in hold in your mouth, a mouthful of this sand, then drink water, and then you can blow the sand out and it's still dry, and it's considered miraculous. There's also the colored sands trick, which I especially love, where you would swallow, again, you're not actually swallowing the sand, dust, and then you'd have capsules filled with colored dust in your mouth. And you would have an order in your mouth for the different colors, and so then you could, blow them out. If you knew exactly where to chew, you have to do it carefully. It requires a lot of skill and training, and these are not unskilled tricks, by the way. So wait till the mango tree trick. What you would do is that you would bite down on the capsule, and then you would blow that color of dust out. Now, of course, you're not magically transforming anything or swallowing dust at all, but to the crowd, if they don't know the trick, it must have seemed very interesting. There's voluntary internment spoken of. In one case, they had a tunnel from the internment site through a false wall that led into an adjacent basement. And so they would get lowered down into the grave and say, "I'm going to spend a week down here," but they're actually in the adjacent basement or something, and they expose that trick. The mango seed trick is funny because mangoes can be mangled and still survive in the process. And so if you really, really strangulate that mango and you coat it just a little bit, it looks like you've got a mango seedling. There's no plant attached to it. But then you put it in clay, add a little bit of water, crack it open. Oh, look, it's a seedling. And that's because it unfolds during the period of the trick. And it must have seemed miraculous. Carrington does, however, admit that there are tricks that they can't quite explain. I think some of them may have been explained now, but in his time, they didn't have explanations for some of the things that they would do. They were still talking about whether certain tribes were capable of levitating back then. Of course, now we know that that's not really a thing, even though some people still claim to me that it's possible. Adherents of certain Hindu yogis still claim that they're capable of levitating. I've seen no evidence of this. Again, this is a skeptic's work. Carrington is not a dedicated occultist, although he does touch upon that. There are a number of tricks, and by the way, this is also re-illustrated by Raven Feather Illustrations, who I'm working with on all of my new works. Very good illustrations for this one, by the way. Again, 38 pages long, so it is a short read. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon, and there are a couple of other similar works up on my books blogs. I do recommend it because it's also quite amusing. That's about all. Peace out.